Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Ranger, watching the stars through the large viewing window. The ship had been exploring this part of space for 3 months now. It was quiet out here, far from Earth and the other human colonies. Jake liked the peace. His crew of 200 people worked well together, and they had not seen any trouble during their mission. Amy Parker sat at her station, monitoring the communication systems. She was young but very good at her job. The ship's computers helped her listen for any signals from other ships or planets. Today felt like any other day until her screen started flashing red. "Captain Morrison," Amy called out, her voice tight with worry. "I'm picking up something big on our sensors, really big." Jake walked over to her station. Ben Sullivan, his second in command, joined them. Ben was older than Jake and had served on many ships before. He always stayed calm when things got difficult. "What are we looking at?" Jake asked. Amy pointed to her screen. 50 ships, sir. They just appeared out of nowhere. They're much larger than anything we've ever built. Ben looked at the readings and whistled softly. "Those are warships, Captain." No doubt about it. Jake felt his stomach tighten. The USS Ranger was built for exploration, not fighting. They had some weapons, but nothing that could handle 50 enemy ships. He had hoped that when humans finally met aliens, it would be peaceful. It looked like he was wrong. "Try to contact them," Jake ordered. "Maybe they just want to talk." Amy worked on her controls, sending out the standard first contact message that all human ships carried. It was simple and friendly, explaining that humans came in peace and wanted to learn about other species in the galaxy. The response came quickly, but it was not what they hoped for. The alien voice was deep and rough, speaking perfect English through their translation systems. "Attention, human vessel. I am Admiral Kethver of the Xanthari Empire. You will surrender your ship immediately and prepare to be taken as prisoners. Your species will bow before the might of our empire." Jake looked at Ben, who shook his head. This was not going well. "Admiral Kethver," Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship USS Ranger. We come in peace. We had no idea this was your territory. Perhaps we can discuss this situation." The alien's laughter came through the speakers, cold and harsh. "Discuss? There is nothing to discuss, human. Your people are weak and primitive. We have conquered 47 species across this galaxy. You will be the 48th. Lisa Shun, the ship's chief engineer, looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. She had been with Jake for 5 years and had never seen him face a situation like this. "We detected their weapons powering up," reported Carlos Rivera from his navigation station. Carlos was usually cheerful, but now his face was serious. "They have enough firepower to destroy us 100 times over." Jake thought quickly. The Xanthari clearly believed humans were weak and easy to defeat. "Maybe that was exactly what they needed to think, Admiral Kethver," Jake said into the communicator. "We are just explorers. We don't want any trouble. Please, can't we work something out?" "The time for talk is over," the alien replied. "Submit now or face destruction." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was waiting for his decision. Amy had her hands ready over the communication controls. Ben was already moving toward the weapons station. Lisa was monitoring the ships. Power systems. Carlos had his hands on the navigation controls, ready to move the ship wherever Jake ordered. Ryan Brooks, who handled the ship's defenses, spoke up from his station. "Captain, their weapons are locked onto us. If we're going to do anything, we need to do it now." Jake made his choice. "I'm sorry, Admiral Kethver, but we cannot surrender our ship." The alien's voice turned angry. "Then you have chosen death. Human fool." The first blast from the Xanthari ships hit the USS Ranger's shields. The ship shook hard, throwing several crew members to the floor. Red lights flashed on the bridge as systems reported damage. "Shields down to 60%, Ryan called out. "They're not even using their full power yet?" Jake grabbed the ships. Intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack by hostile alien forces. All crew to battle stations." "This is not a drill." Throughout the ship, people ran to their positions. In the engine room, Lisa's team worked to keep power flowing to the shields and weapons. In the medical bay, doctors prepared for wounded crew members. In the cargo areas, security teams checked their weapons. Another blast hit the ship, stronger this time. The lights flickered and the deck shook under their feet. Shields down to 30%, Ryan reported. Captain, we can't take much more of this. Jake looked at the tactical display. 50 alien ships surrounded them, each one larger and more powerful than the USS Ranger. If this was a fair fight, they would all be dead in minutes, but Jake knew something the aliens did not. This fight was not going to be fair. Carlos, set course for Earth, Jake ordered. Maximum speed, sir? Carlos looked confused. That will take us straight through their fleet. Do it, Jake said firmly. Amy, send a distress signal. Make sure they can hear it too. Tell Earth Command we're being pursued by hostile aliens and need immediate assistance. Amy's fingers flew over her controls. Signal sent, Captain? The aliens are definitely listening in. Ben moved closer to Jake and spoke quietly. Are you sure about this plan? Jake nodded. Trust me, Ben. Everything depends on making them think. We're running scared. The USS Ranger's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward at maximum speed. The alien ships followed, firing their weapons as the human vessel dodged between them. Admiral Kethver's voice came over the communication system again. You cannot escape, humans. We will follow you to your homeworld and destroy it along with your pathetic ship. Captain, Amy reported, we're receiving a response from Earth Command. Admiral Torres says help is on the way. Jake smiled slightly. Good. Make sure our alien friends hear that message too. The USS Ranger raced through space with the Xanthari fleet in pursuit. To anyone watching, it looked like a desperate escape. The human ship's shields flickered as more alien weapons struck home. Smoke filled parts of the vessel as systems overloaded. From the strained dot, Lisa called from the engineering station. Captain, I'm having trouble keeping the engines stable. We might lose power at any moment. Do your best, Jake replied. We just need to keep ahead of them for a little while longer. The alien fleet stayed close behind, firing constantly but never quite delivering the killing blow. Admiral Kethver wanted to follow the humans back to their planet. He wanted to see their homeworld before he destroyed it. As the USS Ranger limped toward Earth, Jake watched the alien ships on his screens. The Xanthari had no idea what they were flying into. They thought they were chasing a weak enemy back to an even weaker home base. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The ship shuddered again as another alien blast found its mark. Jake held onto his chair as the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. To everyone watching, including the aliens, it looked like the USS Ranger was barely holding together. That was exactly what Jake wanted them to think. The USS Ranger flew through space with the 50 Xanthari warships following close behind. Admiral Kethver sat in his command chair, watching the human ship struggle to stay ahead of his fleet. The alien was tall and covered in dark scales, with 4 arms and bright yellow eyes. He had been conquering worlds for over 30 years, and this felt like his easiest victory yet. Commander Vextal, Kethver called to his second-in-command. How long until we reach the human homeworld? The smaller Xanthari checked his instruments. Based on their current speed, approximately 18 hours, Admiral. The human ship is slowing down. Their engines appear to be failing. Kethver laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Perfect. Let them limp home to their planet. I want to see how many ships they have defending their world before we destroy it. On the USS Ranger, Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet through his rear sensors. The Xanthari ships stayed exactly where he wanted them, close enough to keep pressure on his vessel, but far enough back to avoid any surprises. How are we doing with the damage report? Jake asked. Ben Sullivan looked up from his tablet. Lisa's team has done a great job making it look real. We have smoke coming from 3 different sections, the lights are flickering in the right places, and our engine signature looks like we're running on backup power. Jake nodded. And our real status? All systems running perfectly, Ben replied. Quietly, we could outrun them easily if we wanted to. Amy Parker turned from her communication station. Captain, I'm picking up messages between the alien ships. My translation software is working on their language? What are they saying? Jake asked. They're talking about how weak we are, Amy said. Admiral Kethver is telling his commanders that humans will be easy to defeat. He says we're even weaker than the Fulani people they conquered last year. Carlos Rivera looked up from his navigation controls. Sir, we're about to pass through the Outer Rim colonies. Should I change course to avoid them? Jake shook his head. No, stay on our current path. But send a coded message to the colonies. Tell them to make their defenses look minimal. Already done, Captain, Amy said. All human settlements along our route have been warned. They know to look weak and defenseless. The USS Ranger passed by 3 human colonies during the next few hours. Each time, the Xanthari ship scanned the settlements and found exactly what they expected to see. Small, defensive platforms, a few patrol ships, and populations that seemed panicked by the alien presence. Admiral Kethver was pleased. Look at these pathetic outposts, he told his officers. Their weapons are primitive, their ships are slow, and their people are running in fear. This entire species will surrender within days. Back on the USS Ranger, Lisa Chun worked in the engineering section with her team. They had spent hours making their engine room look damaged and barely functional. Sparks flew from carefully prepared panels, and several screens showed fake system failures. Captain Morrison to engineering, came Jake's voice over the intercom. How much longer can we maintain this speed? Lisa played her part perfectly. Captain, the engines are overheating. We're pushing them way beyond safe limits. I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. Her team tried not to smile as she said this. The USS Ranger's engines were actually running at only 40% power, and although overheating was just special effects they had prepared for moments like this, Ryan Brooks monitored the ship's defensive systems from his station on the bridge. The alien ships were still firing at them occasionally, but their shots were deliberately missing by small margins. The Xanthari wanted to keep the human ship running scared, not destroy it before they reached Earth. They're playing with us, Ryan reported to Jake. Those near misses aren't accidental. They could have destroyed us hours ago if they wanted to. Good, Jake replied. That means they're doing exactly what we hoped they would do. Hours passed. As the chase continued, the Xanthari fleet spread out into a hunting formation, surrounding the USS Ranger from multiple directions. To Admiral Kethver, it looked like they were herding a frightened animal back to its den. Admiral, called out the Xanthari sensor operator, I'm detecting more human ships ahead. It looks like they're trying to come help their vessel. Kethver studied the readings. How many ships? Only 3, sir. Small ones, probably patrol vessels. They don't appear to have heavy weapons. Let them come, Kethver decided. We'll destroy them in front of their friends. It will break the human spirit even more. The 3 human ships appeared on the long-range sensors, moving slowly toward the USS Ranger and its pursuers. They sent out radio messages asking what was happening and offering to help with repairs. Jake listened to the messages and had to admire the acting skills of his fellow captains. They sounded genuinely worried and confused about the alien fleet bearing down on them. Captain Morrison, one of the patrol ship captains, called over the radio. What are those ships? Are they hostile? Stay back, Captain Williams, Jake replied, making his voice sound strained and frightened. These aliens are too powerful. They'll destroy you too. But Captain Williams and his 2 companion ships moved closer anyway, trying to position themselves between the USS Ranger and the alien fleet. It was exactly the kind of brave, hopeless gesture that the Xanthari expected from primitive species. Admiral Kethver gave the order to fire. The 3 human patrol ships exploded in bright flashes, torn apart by Xanthari plasma cannons. The alien admiral watched with satisfaction as debris scattered across space. Did you see that? He called out to his fleet. These humans fly to their deaths without any real plan. They have courage but no intelligence. This conquest will be over before it truly begins. On the USS Ranger, Jake and his crew watched the light show with grim expressions. Those 3 ships had been unmanned drones, built to look like patrol vessels and filled with explosive charges to make their destruction look convincing. But the Xanthari didn't know that. "Signal from Earth Command," Amy reported. "Admiral Torres wants to know our status." Jake picked up the communication device. "Admiral Torres, this is Captain Morrison. We're being pursued by 50 alien warships. They've already destroyed 3 of our patrol ships. We need immediate assistance." The message was broadcast on open channels, making sure the Xanthari could hear every word. Admiral Torres' voice came back, sounding worried. "Captain Morrison, we're scrambling every available ship to intercept. Hold on as long as you can." Kethver listened to the human communications with growing confidence. Their military leaders sounded desperate and unprepared. This was going to be even easier than he had thought. "How long until we reach their homeworld?" he asked again. 6 hours, Admiral, came the reply. "The human ship is slowing down even more. I think their engines are finally failing." The USS Ranger did appear to be struggling now. Black smoke poured from its engine ports, its flight path wobbled slightly, and its speed had dropped by another 10%. Lisa Chun's engineering team was doing an excellent job making their ship look like it was falling apart. "Captain," Carlos called out from navigation. "We're approaching the Sol system? Earth should be visible on our screens in about 20 minutes, Jake nodded. "Good. Send another distress call to Earth Defense Command. Make it sound really desperate." This time, Amy composed the message carefully. "Earth Command, this is USS Ranger. We are being pursued by a massive alien fleet. Our engines are failing and our weapons are no match for them. They have already destroyed 3 of our ships. We estimate arrival at Earth in 5 hours. Please evacuate all civilian populations and prepare planetary defenses." The message reached both Earth and the Xanthari fleet at the same time. "Admiral." Kethver was delighted to hear the panic in human communications. "They're evacuating their civilians," he told his officers. "They know they cannot win. This will be a complete victory for the Xanthari Empire." As the hours passed, more human distress calls filled the radio waves. Ships throughout the Sol system reported the approaching alien fleet and begged for help. Military commanders discussed evacuation plans and spoke in worried voices about their chances of survival. The Xanthari fleet listened to it all, growing more confident with every message they intercepted. These humans were clearly terrified and had no idea how to fight against superior alien technology. Admiral Kethver began planning his victory speech. He would broadcast it to the entire galaxy, announcing the conquest of another species and the expansion of Xanthari territory. It would strengthen his position in the Empire and possibly earn him promotion to Grand Admiral. The USS Ranger limped toward Earth with its pursuers close behind, trailing smoke and sending out desperate calls for help. To anyone watching it, looked like humanity was about to face its darkest hour, but Jake Morrison knew better. The real show was about to begin. The USS Ranger finally entered the Sol system with thick black smoke trailing from its engines. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. Behind them, the 50 Xanthari warships followed like hungry wolves chasing wounded prey. "There it is," Admiral Kethver said from his command ship, staring at the blue and green planet ahead. "The human homeworld. It looks so peaceful and defenseless." Commander Vextal studied his sensor readings. "Admiral, I'm detecting the human defensive fleet. They have 23 ships positioned around their planet." Kethver laughed his harsh, metallic laugh. 23 ships against our 50? And look at the size of them. Most are smaller than our escort vessels. This will be a massacre. The human defensive fleet did look pitiful compared to the massive Xanthari warships. The human ships were older models, some clearly built for cargo transport rather than combat. They formed a loose circle around Earth, looking more like a desperate last stand than a proper military formation. On board the orbital station above Earth, Defense Coordinator Helen Adams watched the approaching fleets through her command center. Windows. She was a tall woman with gray hair who had served in the human military for 30 years. To anyone listening to her communications, she sounded terrified. "All ships, this is Earth Defense Command," Helen broadcast on open channels. "Unknown alien fleet approaching Earth space. All civilian vessels clear the area immediately. Military. Vessels take defensive positions." The panic in her voice was perfect. Even her own staff almost believed she was really scared. Captain Jake brought the USS Ranger to a stop near the human defensive fleet. His ship looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Sparks flew from damaged panels and several sections were completely dark. "Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison," Jake said over the radio. "We made it home, but our engines are completely dead. The alien fleet has 50 warships, all larger and more advanced than anything we have." Admiral Frank Torres appeared on the communication screen from Earth's surface. He was an older man with white hair and worry lines on his face. Behind him, other human military leaders moved around frantically, pointing at screens and talking in worried voices. "Captain Morrison, thank God you made it back alive," Admiral Torres said. "We've been monitoring the alien fleet. Their weapons are beyond anything we've seen before." Admiral Kethver intercepted this communication and smiled with satisfaction. The human military leaders were clearly overwhelmed and afraid. This conquest would be simpler than taking candy from a child. "Attention human vessels," Kethver broadcast to the entire system. "I am Admiral Kethver of the Xanthari Empire. Your pathetic defensive fleet cannot stand against our might. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." The human ships responded by powering up their weapons and moving into battle formation. But their movements were slow and clumsy, like students trying to remember their training under pressure. "Look at them," Kethver told his officers. "They can barely fly their own ships properly. This species is even weaker than the Fulani." Admiral Torres appeared on screens throughout the human fleet. "All ships, this is Earth Command. We will not surrender our homeworld to these invaders. Fight with everything you have. For Earth and for humanity." The words were brave, but Torres' voice shook as he spoke them. The human defenders looked ready to fight, but they also looked terrified of what was coming. Kethver decided to demonstrate Xanthari power before demanding final surrender. "Target their largest warship," he ordered. "Destroy it with a single shot. Let them see how hopeless their situation truly is." The Xanthari flagship fired one massive plasma blast at the human battleship Earth's Pride. The old vessel exploded in a brilliant fireball, breaking into pieces that scattered across space. Several human ships immediately broke formation, apparently panicking at the sight of their flagship's destruction. Two smaller vessels actually turned and began fleeing toward the outer planets. "Cowards," Kethver said with disgust. "They run before the battle even begins. No wonder this species has never expanded beyond their own star system." But most of the human fleet stayed in position, though their formation looked ragged and uncertain. The remaining ships were a mix of old cruisers, converted cargo vessels, and a few newer frigates that still looked primitive compared to Xanthari technology. Helen Adams coordinated the human response from her orbital station. Her voice came over the radio, giving orders that sounded confused and desperate. "Squadron 7, move to protect the lunar colonies. Squadron 3, try to get between the aliens and Earth. All ships, remember your families are counting on you." The human ships moved according to her orders, but their positioning looked amateurish to the experienced Xanthari commanders. Several vessels left gaps in their formation that enemy ships could easily exploit. "This is almost sad," Commander Vextel observed. "They're trying so hard, but they have no idea how to fight a real space battle." Kethver nodded. "Begin the attack. Destroy half their fleet, then demand surrender. I want to see their planets." Leaders begged for mercy. The Xanthari fleet opened fire with devastating effectiveness. Human ships exploded one after another as alien plasma cannons found their targets. The USS Liberty broke in half. The USS Freedom spun out of control with its engines destroyed. The USS Constitution exploded when its ammunition storage was hit. Within minutes, The human defensive fleet was reduced from 23 ships to 11. The survivors looked badly damaged and barely able to continue fighting. Admiral Torres appeared on the communication channels again, his face pale with shock. All remaining ships fall back to Earth orbit. Protect the evacuation transports. Behind him, human military officers ran back and forth carrying reports and looking panicked. One young lieutenant approached Torres and whispered something that made the admiral close his eyes in despair. "Admiral Kethver," Torres called out to the alien fleet. "Please, can we discuss terms? Our people are defenseless. Surely we can reach some agreement." Kethver enjoyed the desperation in the human commander's voice. "There are no terms, human. Only complete surrender. Your species will serve the Xanthari Empire or face extinction." "But our civilians," Torres pleaded. "At least let us evacuate the children and elderly to our colony worlds." "No evacuations," Kethver replied coldly. "Everyone stays on the planet. You will all learn what it means to serve your new masters." The remaining human ships continued to fight, but their resistance was clearly hopeless. They moved slowly. Their weapons were weak, and their tactics were those of amateurs trying to face professional soldiers. Lisa Chun's voice came over the USS Ranger's intercom, sounding exhausted and defeated. "Captain, our engines are completely dead. We can't move at all. We're sitting ducks out here." Jake Morrison looked around his bridge at his crew. Amy Parker sat at her station with tears in her eyes, apparently overwhelmed by the destruction of so many human ships. Carlos Rivera stared at his navigation controls as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Ben Sullivan stood beside Jake's chair, his face grim with the knowledge that they were witnessing humanity's darkest hour. But Jake knew something that Admiral Kethver didn't know. He knew that everything the Xanthari had seen so far was carefully planned theater. The destroyed ships had been unmanned drones designed to explode dramatically. The surviving vessels were crewed by volunteers who were following a very specific script. Most importantly, Jake knew that the real human fleet was still hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Admiral Kethver prepared to contact Earth's surface and demand to speak with their planetary leaders. He wanted to savor this moment of complete victory over another primitive species. "Open a channel to the planet's surface," he ordered. "It's time for these humans to learn their place in the galaxy." What Kethver didn't realize was that he was about to get the education of his lifetime. The humans were ready to show him what they had really been hiding, and it was far more than he could possibly imagine. The demonstration was about to begin, and it would change everything the Xanthari thought they knew about this small blue planet and the species that called it home. Admiral Kethver stood proudly on his command deck, watching the burning remains of human ships float around Earth. His 50 warships had easily destroyed half of the planet's defensive fleet, and the survivors looked ready to surrender at any moment. "Open a channel to the planet's surface," he ordered. "I want to speak directly to their leaders." The communication screen flickered to life, showing a large room filled with important-looking humans. At the center sat a woman in her 50s, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. She wore a simple blue suit and sat behind a wooden desk with flags behind her. "I am President Monica Davis of the United Earth Government," she said in a steady voice. "You must be Admiral Kethver." Kethver was surprised by her calm tone. Most species begged for mercy by this point. "You seem remarkably composed for someone whose world is about to be conquered." President Davis smiled slightly. "That's because I wanted to thank you for the demonstration, Admiral. Your fleet's performance was quite impressive." "Demonstration?" Kethver looked confused. "This is not a demonstration, human. This is your defeat." "Oh, I think there's been a misunderstanding," President Davis replied. She gestured to the people around her. "Admiral Kethver, I'd like you to meet General Peter Knox, our military commander, and Dr. Alex Cameron, our chief defense scientist, General." Knox was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He stepped forward and nodded politely to the alien admiral. "Admiral Kethver, we've been watching your empire's military tactics for quite some time. Your attack patterns are very well organized." "Doctor," Cameron was younger, with messy brown hair and thick glasses. He looked excited rather than afraid. Yes, your plasma cannon technology is fascinating. We've learned a great deal from observing your fleet's capabilities. Kethver felt a strange uneasiness growing in his chest. These humans were not acting like defeated enemies. They were acting like they had been expecting this encounter. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your planet is defenseless. You will surrender now or face complete annihilation." President Davis leaned back in her chair. "Admiral, I'm afraid there's something you need to understand. What you just witnessed wasn't our defensive fleet. It was a training exercise." "Training? Exercise?" Kethver's forearms tensed with anger. "I watched your ships explode. I heard your commanders panic. Your people were terrified." "They were acting," General Knox explained calmly. "Every ship you destroyed was an unmanned drone designed to look like a real vessel. Every communication you intercepted was carefully scripted. We've been preparing for this meeting for a very long time." Dr. Cameron pulled out a tablet and showed some data to the camera. "We've been monitoring your empire's expansion across the galaxy for over 200 years, Admiral. We know about every species you've conquered and every tactic you use." Kethver felt his confidence beginning to crack. "That's impossible. Your species only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. You're primitive newcomers to the galaxy. That's what we wanted everyone to think," President Davis said. "It's much easier to study potential threats when they don't know you're watching them." On the USS Ranger, Captain Jake Morrison listened to the conversation with satisfaction. His crew had stopped pretending to be damaged and were now watching their screens with professional interest. "Captain," Amy Parker said, "should we reveal our true status now?" Jake nodded. "Do it. Show them what the Ranger can really do." Suddenly, the USS Ranger's engines roared to life with power that made the ship's previous performance look like a joke. The black smoke disappeared, the flickering lights became steady, and weapon systems that had been hidden came online. "Admiral Kethver," Jake said over the communication channel, "this is Captain Morrison. I believe I owe you an apology for the deception." Kethver stared at the human ship in shock. The vessel that had been limping and smoking for hours now looked like a completely different ship. Its hull gleamed with energy shields, and weapon ports that hadn't been visible before were now clearly active. "You see," Jake continued, "we were never really damaged. We were testing your response times, your weapon accuracy, and your tactical decisions. You performed exactly as our analysts predicted." Commander Vextal looked at his sensor readings with growing alarm. "Admiral, the human ship's power output has increased by over 500%. It's showing weapon systems we never detected before." Back on Earth, President Davis continued her explanation. "Admiral Kethver, I need to tell you something that might come as a shock. Everything you've seen so far represents approximately 1% of humanity's actual military capability." The words hit Kethver like a physical blow. 1%? That's impossible. We destroyed half your fleet. "You destroyed half of our old training drones," General Knox corrected. "Our actual military fleet is somewhat larger." Dr. Cameron looked up from his tablet with a cheerful expression. "By somewhat larger, the general means about 10,000 times larger. We've been building ships and weapons for the past century, just in case we ever needed them." Kethver felt his world spinning. 10,000 times? You're lying. No species could hide that kind of military power. "We're very good at hiding things," President Davis said. "For example, you've been in our solar system for several hours now, but you still haven't detected our real defensive positions." Admiral Torres, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Unlike his earlier panicked appearance, he now looked calm and professional. "Admiral Kethver, would you like to see what 1% of our actual fleet looks like?" Before Kethver could answer, his sensor operator called out in alarm. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Ships are decloaking everywhere." Kethver looked at his tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of ships were appearing from nowhere, surrounding his fleet from every direction. They were sleek, powerful vessels that made his own warships look outdated and primitive. How many? He whispered. Over 800 ships, Admiral, came the terrified reply. And they're still appearing. Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication channel again. Admiral Kethver, those are just the ships we keep in our home system for training purposes. They're actually some of our older models. Helen Adams, the defense coordinator who had sounded so panicked earlier, now spoke with the voice of a professional. Military officer. Admiral, we've been tracking your fleet since you entered our territory 3 days ago. We allowed you to chase Captain Morrison's ship because we wanted to observe your tactics firsthand. 3 days ago? Kethver felt dizzy. But we only detected the human ship yesterday. That's because we let you detect it, Helen explained. Captain Morrison's ship has stealth capabilities that your sensors can't penetrate. He could have avoided you completely if he wanted to. Dr. Cameron looked excited as he shared more information. We've also been analyzing your ship designs, Admiral. Your plasma cannons are quite good, but they're based on technology that's about 50 years behind our current systems. 50 years? Kethver could barely speak. Actually, closer to 60 years, Dr. Cameron corrected himself. We developed better plasma technology back in 2165, but we kept using the older versions for our visible ships so no one would know how advanced we really were. President Davis stood up from her chair. Admiral Kethver, you came here planning to conquer Earth and enslave humanity. Instead, you've walked into a situation that's completely beyond your understanding. You have 2 choices, General Knox said. You can surrender your fleet and accept our terms for peaceful coexistence, or you can continue to fight and discover exactly what our real weapons can do. Kethver looked at his tactical display again. His 50 ships were now surrounded by nearly 1,000 human vessels, each one more advanced than anything his empire had ever built. The species he had thought was primitive and weak had just revealed technology that made the Zenthari Empire look like children playing with toys. This is impossible, he said quietly. How could we have been so wrong about your capabilities? President Davis smiled kindly. Because we're very good at appearing weak when we need to. It's a useful skill when you're trying to avoid unnecessary conflicts. But why? Kethver asked. Why hide your true strength? Why not announce your power? To the galaxy? Because power without wisdom is dangerous, President Davis replied. We prefer to let aggressive species reveal their intentions before we show them what we're really capable of. The alien admiral stared at the screen, finally understanding that everything he thought he knew about humans was wrong. The species he had planned to conquer in a few hours had been preparing for this moment for decades, and this was still only 1% of their true capability. Admiral Kethver stared at the tactical display showing nearly 1,000 human ships surrounding his fleet. His hands shook as he tried to understand how wrong he had been about these creatures. The species he thought was weak and primitive had just revealed technology that made his empire look like Stone Age warriors. This must be some kind of trick, he said to his officers. Use deep scans. Find out if these ships are real or just more illusions. Commander Vextel worked frantically at his controls. Admiral, the scans confirm it. These are real warships with active weapon systems. Their power readings are beyond anything in our databases. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication channel from the USS Ranger. Admiral Kethver, I know this is difficult to accept, but we're not using tricks or illusions anymore. Would you like us to demonstrate what our ships can actually do? Before Kethver could answer, Jake's ship began to move. The USS Ranger, which had been drifting helplessly for hours, suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been impossible. It zipped between the Zenthari ships like a small fighter, moving so fast that the alien weapons couldn't even track it. How is that possible? Kethver demanded. No ship that size should be able to move like that. Enhanced gravity manipulation. Jake explained calmly as his ship performed maneuvers that defied physics. We developed it about 30 years ago, but we kept it secret. It's much more advanced than the simple thrust engines we've been pretending to use. The USS Ranger wasn't alone. Dozens of other human ships began moving with the same impossible speed and agility. They danced around the heavy Xanthari warships. Like birds flying around elephants. Admiral Kate Bennett's voice came from the human flagship Earth Sword. Admiral Kethfer, these are just our scout ships. Would you like to see what our actual warships can do? A massive human vessel nearly twice the size of Kethfer's flagship moved slowly forward. Unlike the smaller ships, this one didn't need to show off with fancy maneuvers. Its presence alone was enough to make the alien admiral nervous. That ship wasn't there before, Commander Vextel reported. It just appeared from nowhere. Advanced cloaking technology, Admiral Bennett explained. This is the UHS Guardian. It's one of our newer battleships, though not our largest. Colonel Nick Foster led a squadron of human fighters that suddenly appeared around the Xanthari fleet. These small ships moved even faster than the USS Ranger, weaving impossible patterns through space while staying in perfect formation. Impossible, breathed Kethfer. Fighters can't maintain formation at those speeds. The G-forces would kill any pilot. Not if you have proper inertial dampening, Colonel Foster replied cheerfully. Plus, some of our fighters don't actually have pilots. They're controlled by artificial intelligence systems. Commander Jenna Walsh spoke from the orbital platform above Earth. Admiral Kethfer, you might be interested to know that we have defensive platforms throughout our solar system. Most of them have been watching you since you arrived. Suddenly, massive structures became visible on moons, asteroids, and space stations throughout the system. Weapon platforms that had been completely hidden now revealed themselves, all pointing directly at the Xanthari fleet. How many? Kethfer asked weakly. In this system alone? About 2,000 platforms, Commander. Walsh replied. Each one is capable of destroying a ship your size with a single shot. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Palmer's voice came from one of Jupiter's moons. We also have installations on the outer planets, Admiral. They've been charging their gravitational weapons for the past few hours. Gravitational weapons? Kethfer had never heard of such things. They manipulate gravity fields to disable ships without destroying them, Palmer explained. Much more civilized than blowing things up, don't you think? Major Sophie Roberts demonstrated the technology by activating a small gravitational field around one of the Xanthari escort ships. The alien vessel suddenly found itself unable to move in any direction, held in place by forces it couldn't understand or fight against. Release my ship immediately, Kethfer demanded. Of course, Major Roberts replied, and the gravitational field disappeared. The Xanthari ship lurched forward as its engines, which had been fighting against the gravity field, suddenly had nothing to push against. Dr. Rachel Foster appeared on the communication screen from a research station. Admiral Kethfer, I've been studying your species' biology and psychology for the past few hours. Did you know that Xanthari brain patterns show specific responses to displays of superior technology? You've been studying us? Kethfer felt violated. How? Long-range bioscanners, Dr. Foster explained. We've been monitoring your crew's vital signs and stress levels throughout this encounter. It's fascinating how quickly your confidence disappeared when you realized you weren't the superior force. Admiral Steve Murphy commanded a battle group that had been hidden behind Earth's moon. His ships moved into view, revealing weapon systems that looked nothing like the primitive cannons the Xanthari had expected. These are quantum disruptors, Admiral Murphy explained, noting Kethfer's confused expression. They can break apart the molecular bonds in any material. We prefer not to use them unless absolutely necessary, since they tend to make things disappear completely. Commander Walsh activated one of the orbital platforms to demonstrate. A small asteroid several kilometers away simply vanished, reduced to nothing but free-floating atoms in the space of a second. That asteroid was about the same size as one of your cruisers, she noted helpfully. Kethfer felt his remaining confidence crumble completely. What do you want from us? President Davis appeared on the main communication screen again. That's a very good question, Admiral. What we want is peace. We want you to return to your empire and tell them that humanity exists, that we're willing to coexist peacefully, but that we're not interested in being conquered. But your technology, Kethfer protested. You could conquer our entire empire with what you've shown me today. Probably, President Davis agreed. But conquering other species isn't something we're interested in. We prefer to defend ourselves and let others live their own lives. General Knox stepped forward. However, Admiral, we should mention that we've been monitoring other aggressive species throughout the galaxy. If your empire, or any other empire, decides to attack peaceful worlds, we might have to reconsider our non-interference policy. Dr. Cameron pulled out his tablet again. We've identified 17 different aggressive species that regularly attack weaker civilizations. We've been keeping detailed records of their activities. You're watching the entire galaxy? Kethfer asked. Most of it, Dr. Cameron replied. We have monitoring stations in over 3,000 star systems. We like to know what's happening in our neighborhood. Admiral Torres smiled at the alien's shocked expression. Admiral Kethfer, humanity learned long ago that the best way to ensure peace is to be so overwhelmingly powerful that war becomes unthinkable for potential enemies. But you let us attack you, Kethfer said. You could have stopped us before we ever reached your system. We could have, President Davis agreed. But we wanted to give you a chance to choose peace on your own. Unfortunately, you chose aggression. Instead, Jake Morrison moved the USS Ranger close to Kethfer's flagship. Admiral, your empire has two options now. You can accept peaceful coexistence with humanity and other species, or you can continue your aggressive expansion and discover. What happens when you threaten worlds under our protection? Protection? Kethfer asked. We've been quietly protecting several species from aggressive empires like yours, Admiral Bennett explained. The Fulani people you conquered last year? They're actually living safely on planets we provided for. Your empire has been ruling empty worlds for months without realizing it. Kethfer felt dizzy. You evacuated an entire species without us knowing? We're very good at that sort of thing, General Knox said. We've relocated 6 different species to safety over the past decade. Their original worlds now have monitoring stations disguised as ruins. Dr. Foster looked excited again. It's amazing how easy it is to fool conquering armies when you know they're coming years in advance. President Davis leaned forward in her chair. Admiral Kethfer, you came here to demonstrate Xanthari power to a weak human species. Instead, you've learned that humanity has been watching your empire for generations and could have stopped your expansion anytime we chose to. What happens now? Kethfer asked quietly. Now you go home, President Davis replied. You tell your leaders what you've learned here. You explain that humanity offers peaceful coexistence but will not tolerate aggression against ourselves or others. And if our empire chooses war? Admiral Torres smiled grimly. Then you'll discover what the other 99% of our military capability looks like. Jake Morrison opened a channel to the entire Xanthari fleet. All Xanthari vessels. You have safe passage back to your territory. Your weapons will be disabled during your journey as a precaution, but they'll be restored once you reach your borders. Without any visible action from the human ships, every Xanthari weapon system simply stopped working. How did you do that? Kethfer demanded. Quantum interference, Dr. Cameron explained. Your weapon systems will work fine once you're back in your own space.